Hi, this is Robert from ITQ. We're on the floor of KubeCon Amsterdam, and I have a very special guest with me today. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, hello. I'm Coté. I work at VMware. I live here in Amsterdam, which is nice. Just don't ask me to speak Dutch. It's terrible. So what I do at VMware is I basically talk with organizations about how they change how they work to get better at software. To be very brief.
Right. Okay. So, but what are you doing here?
Well, other than living here, which is not a good answer,
Oh.
but no, our company and a lot of the organizations I talk with, they're interested in getting Kubernetes in place and then building a platform on top of it just to help their application developers out. So I think, if you go out and you talk with people, they're very, companies, organizations, which are usually people that you talk with. They really want to put Kubernetes in place as their kind of infrastructure, their cloud layer. And some of them have, and some of them haven't. And so I'm really interested in so you get that in place, and there's like a blinking cursor of infrastructure. And then you need something for application developers, how's that going, right? What works out there. So
yeah. Are you
that's
saying,
one way of looking at it.
Are you saying that developers don't like the blinking cursor? That's
Well,
not enough for them?
This is I think the Gartner hype cycle, the diffusion of innovation curve. I think there's a 1% to 5% amount of developers who are very, very early adopters, and I think they love tinkering around with stuff. But then you start climbing up this curve into the early and the late majority before you hit the trough of disillusionment, and then the plateau of productivity. And I think the more you go along that would be the right side of that chart. People just want to do their job. They're like, I'm an application developer. Someone else should configure this cloud stuff for me.
Yeah. So we seem to have reached a little bit further along that curve when it comes to the runtime part of this.
Yeah.
Kubernetes itself, right? That seems to be a solved problem. At least, that's stabilizing because you can see that people's interest and what they're talking about is moving in other areas where we might be elsewhere on that curve.
Yeah.
It's kind of reflected in the subjects and the things we see here. So what's the kind of trends that you've been seeing up till now? It's only the first day of KubeCon.
Oh, sure.
It's still early days, but what's where's the conversation going?
Well, I think many of the people I've talked, we gave away a lot of free bottles. So I got to have a lot of mini conversations with people. There's a few people I talk with who are already running Kubernetes. And you go talk to the Mercedes-Benz people, and they've been running Kubernetes for 5 years, in addition to things like Cloud Foundry and other platforms. They run everything. But I think there's probably very few people who have run it that long, whereas a lot of the people I've talked with, they are starting to get into it, and they're more of the DevOps, the SRE, the operations people, and they're kind of trying to sort out the roles and who owns what.
Yeah, and and it's interesting because we see the CNCF landscape chart kind of exploding. Lots of tools. We had lots of low-level kind of runtime tooling, lots of CNIs, lots of CSI, lots of stuff like that. But now we're shifting more towards, okay, what do we do with all this stuff? So we're seeing more projects and more momentum around, how do we actually get above that value line? How do we do developer experience?
Right.
And that this is probably related to why platform engineering seems to be the hype word for this year.
Yeah, for sure.
But what does platform engineering mean to you? And haven't we been doing this for 30 years already?
Yeah. Well, I think to try to be as concise as possible, which you know me, this might be very difficult, but
we have time.
I think if you look, so there's a white paper that a working group in the CNCF just released that goes over their reference architecture. And what's distinct about that from essentially underneath the lower level is you have infrastructure. And then there's this big, I used to call these burgers, there's this big fat patty in the middle that's basically middleware, and the services that you need and all the stuff that application developers would use. And then on top is kind of I actually forget what's on top, applications, things like that. And I think the evolution, the incremental improvement of something like platform engineering from DevOps or even SRE is, to put it in a cutesy way, that little infrastructure thing just says infrastructure, right? It doesn't say Kubernetes, it doesn't say IaaS, it's just infrastructure capabilities, right? And so this hasn't quite shaken out yet, but the direction I hope platform engineering is going in is whatever infrastructure. What's important is this middleware stuff. And then the other thing that's slightly, well, that is different in an evolution is, if our customers are developers, we should look at all the things developers do, which is kind of, shows the importance of like backstage as something that people are interested in, which is like, in the same way that Kubernetes standardizes the API, if you will, for infrastructure, what if we looked at all the collaboration stuff developers do and we standardize that, right? Because like, I mean, y'all do consulting, so I'm sure when you go into any customer site, like the way that all the developers interact with inside a company is, if not slightly, very different, right? Whereas if there was a more of an industry standard way of doing it, at least at the kind of software, the portal, if you will, layer, that would probably be beneficial. And so I think if you marry those two things together, running your middleware on top of probably a container as a service, and then also kind of extending the traditional role of a DevOps or an SRE person into like tools developers use, and trying to also standardize it, right? Like kind of up from the bottom like Backstage does. That feels like, at least to me, that's what I want platform engineering to be, because I'm an application developer. Well, I make slides now, but I used to be. So like, I just want development to be easier.
Yeah, but I mean, as that middleware layer, the patty in the burger starts, I'm getting hungry, it starts to expand.
The best kind of burger.
Yeah, but it's not a smash burger though, because that would be,
anyway.
Oh
yeah, you got to layer those.
Exactly, yeah. Well, so as this expands, I mean, I'm seeing more need for more specialties, because the lower level stuff doesn't go away. I mean, last year at Valencia, I heard the term app ops for the first time. And people were referring, and what they meant was, the stuff that sits directly underneath the application value line. So stuff like service mesh.
Yeah.
And something like Backstage would probably live in that layer as well.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what app ops is, but yes. That would make sense. Yeah, that's interesting.
But I mean, do we have the skill sets in the industry? I was talking earlier to the head of education with the CNCF, well, the head of certification for the CNCF, I should say, but certification and education, it's a huge focus area for them, and because there is a skill gap. Won't this get larger? I mean, what are the kind of things we could be doing to make this stuff more manageable? I mean, is it simply like, we should be reducing the landscape chart?
Like to make all of it up and down more manageable, or just the platform part?
Just the platform part. This is.
I like that.
That's yeah. They're a little train.
Yeah. Y'all have to break out into some like drinking songs. I don't know any of them, but I'm sure y'all do. That would be great.
I'm trying to think of some kind of cloud-native analogy if we watch it happens. But
well, to go back to your question, I think there is starting to be more focus and expertise on kind of like finishing out that whole stack for developers, right, to service developers. But I do think that there has been, I don't know, depending on what mood I'm in any given day, like a 5 or 7 year like distraction from like building up skill and paying attention to developers, right? And it's fine. We're all citizens of the computer world, and like we float around in a great, gigantic, big boat of fun.
Yeah.
But like, it has been a long time since like application developers, that app ops, even though I don't know what it is, has been like a focus and like the hotspot. That's what's on a dog. The exciting area of innovation, right? Like, I think when microservices were around, there was a lot of thinking about that. But like, it has been a long time since application developers were like the thing everyone was solving. Whereas like, what we've been solving for the past 5 or 7 years is like container management. And hopefully we're done with that, and we can go back up the stack and figure out application stuff.
So I know it's an interest of yours and of mine. What role do you think AI has to play in all this?
Oh yeah. Well, I think in order for it to play a big enough role, people are going to have like, I don't even know what you would call it, but like not public cloud AI, right? Like we have, of course, people at VMware think about this, and I was hearing, who was going over this? I was talking with someone else, and like the concern is, it was the CNCF people they were talking earlier today. Like, there's all sorts of weird IP and copyright issues, right? And like, if I remember, at least in the US, I don't know how it is here, but like, there was a ruling that some whatever we would call it, that AI generated things can't be copyrighted, right? And so for you as me as individuals, what do we care? But as a company, you would say all right, so if I wrote some software I want to sell with AI and I can't copyright it, yee, right? That's not cool as far as making money. And then there's also just the notion of if I send some code off to the open cloud and it says right there in the chat GPT thing, we might use your stuff. It's said much more artfully. Also not cool. So I think once you can bring in and it's a private cloud conversation, right? Once you can cordon off and have a VPC, is that a thing? And you kind of trust the boundaries of where your stuff is going, then sure, it'll probably solve a lot of problems. And it might also cause problems. I finally got it to start scripting things for me, and that application developer person in my head was this is bad, this is bad. I'm not thinking about the big picture and the long-term use of it.
It's only bad if you stop checking what it's doing.
Yeah. But yeah, I think there's all sorts of things that it would be great for solving. I came across this the other day, it probably is pretty good at writing docs, which I'm sure people that you work with don't have this problem, but you might have heard that developers and operations people are bad at writing docs, if they even do it. So that might be a cool thing for it to solve. Yes. Everything's very tidy and operational here in the Netherlands, so probably lots of docs.
Yeah, and these are all ways that we might simplify this stuff. If the skill gap remains, and if these layers keep building, we're going to need a lot of shortcuts. And if there's one thing I've been using GPT for, it's to shortcut some of exactly that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the toil, right?
The toil, yeah.
I think analogously, we don't write, well, I don't write in anything, but we don't write in assembly anymore, and we definitely don't write in binary, and no one writes a file system. Very few people do. And so analogously, we hopefully don't write parsers, right? We don't necessarily write compilers like some people do, but we're very used to in the programming world, let's get the computer to do this thing for me that I used to type or punch into a card. And it seems like a natural extension. You ask, we already have compilers and parsers and other things that will and the Spring framework that'll write all this code for you. We're already comfortable with code being written for us. Is that too much passive voice? That at some point you could just say in the same way that you would use the Spring framework and say make a REST API for me. I don't care how, to use that old haiku in a weird way. You could ask the AI thing to do it, and we probably won't care.
And for troubleshooting as well.
Yeah. There's all that stuff as well.
I'd be very surprised if troubleshooting tools and networking tools didn't have an AI element in them in the next few years.
Yeah. And that's, I think once we get the ability to cordon off what the AI is doing, so that our stuff isn't training data and gets out or whatever, and then
to Skynet. Yeah,
exactly. And then also once we can load all of our stuff into it, right? Then definitely we'll get to that phase where you could start. Remember AI ops? We might actually start to do AI ops. That would be fun.
Is this the year of AI ops?
Oh, I hope so.
Always next year is the year of AI ops.
Yeah, GPT ops or something. I don't know.
Right. Well, Michael, I want to thank you for your time.
Sure.
Like I said, we're only on day one of KubeCon, and already seen so many cool things.
Yeah.
So I look forward to the next few days. We're going to bump into you, I'm sure, again.
Yeah. As always, it's always great talking with y'all.
Cool. Right. Thanks for your time.
Sure.
And we'll see you guys next time.
Bye-bye.